words about our guest today. We're happy to welcome Marjan Moghaddam, who's an award-winning, pioneering, New York City-based digital artist and animator who works primarily with 3D, CG, motion capture, and digital media for animation, print, 2D, 3D, sculpture, interactive media, internet, avatteering, AR, and VR. Are you aware of what all those words mean? Hopefully you're going to find out a little bit today. She is the recipient of numerous grants for innovative and cutting-edge art, such as a Rockefeller Fund, the New York Department of Cultural Affairs, the Brooklyn Arts Council, and the Experimental Television Fund. She was the featured performing artist for the Visual Music Marathon. She was also featured artist for the launch of .com Gallery, an international forum for the digital arts in 1996 on the internet, which is quite early, by the way. The first commercial New York City gallery based entirely on the internet. Hailed as a trailblazer in the world of digital art by the Herald Tribune and the first lady of animated painting by the Examiner, most recently she became one of the winners of the 2017 International Digital Sculpture Prize for her #ArtHack, #DigitalBodies series on Instagram, and is currently exhibiting an augmented reality app as part of the exhibition of the winners at the Ulm Museum in Germany. Her works, ArtHack and #ArtHack, #DigitalBodies, a conceptual Instagram-based art collection from the last 2 years, has additionally gone viral on the internet of this year, with her Bazier at Mary Boone in Waxish and Glassish garnering over 1.4 million views and 29,000 shares on the Nowness Facebook post, and an additional 1 million views on Instagram through regrams on Nowness. That's kind of incredible. Right? It's
actually up to 2.2 million views on Art Gates on Instagram, but I have the link, so.
Yeah. I'm happy when I get 100 hits on Facebook. I don't know about you. I'm like, whoa, I got 100, and we're talking millions here. That's pretty fabulous. Her 3-decade-long computer art practice is featured in a comprehensive article by new media art historian Carissa Terranova in Peripheral Vision Arts magazine, and also a 33-page in-depth profile and articulation art review. She is a tenured and full professor of computer graphics and animation at the Brooklyn campus of Long Island University. Please welcome Marjan Moghaddam.
Hi, it's wonderful to be out here at William Paterson University, and what a lovely area, I have to say. It's just so nice to get out of Brooklyn and come out here and see the trees and the colors and everything. So thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for having me here. I actually made sure to have links for a lot of the stuff that Michael said here, so I'm going to just quickly start with the 1980s. And what I'm going to do is go through stuff very, very quickly because we don't have a lot of time. And I have a large body of work, so there's no way I can show you everything, but I want to show just a couple of snippets because it's important, I think, for me to contextualize my work in terms of my history. My introduction to the computer came as a student in 1979 at NYIT when one of the faculty there, Albert Ray Smith, had created the world's first paint program. And back then, they had big VAX supercomputers that allowed you to paint. And there was a sign on the cover that said you weren't allowed to remove the cover, you'd go to prison, because those computers were used for missile guidance control systems. So it was like a national secret. You weren't supposed to know how it worked. So that was my first introduction to the computer and the idea of making art with the computer. So in the 1980s, I would do paintings on a Commodore 64 around 1983 and show those. I would also do some of the electronic art that you see here. I'm going to let like just a minute or two of this run just so that you can kind of, let me scrub through, get a sense of 1980s. That's, by the way, performance artist John Kelly, who's actually quite an amazing 1980s performance artist, and he continues to be actively engaged as a performance artist too. Then by the mid-1980s, and I think this is something you might find as interesting, between 1984 and 1988, I shot bands at the legendary Pyramid Club. That's Dean Johnson, who was a famous performance artist in the 1980s. And I also shot art exhibitions. I showed video art. I did music videos, etc. I'm going to stop Dean briefly and just show you this clip. This is Elliot Sharp, the composer and electronic musician. He also founder of The Stone in the East Village, which is a well-known place for experimental music. That's actually Sappho, a no-wave band from France. And this is, you're about to see actually a gallery opening, the gallery that I used to show at frequently called Pompeii Gallery in the East Village. I'll give you 30 seconds of the East Village gallery scene of the 1980s. And actually, those guys, I did a lot of projects with Disturbed Form. They would do these sort of like Bauhaus cutouts on stage. If we had more time, I would show you all the fantastic things I did with them. I also did music videos, and in 1985, I actually had this music video on medium rotation on MTV back when they showed music videos on a show called The Cutting Edge, which I shot and directed and edited. I also did other music videos, including 3 Teens Kill 4, who were recently at the Whitney Museum as part of the David Wisnarowitz show there. David was in that band, and I also did a music video with them. And if you want to kind of see what I look like around this time, here's a little short snippet of me. That's actually Bush Tetras, an all-girl punk band from the 80s. Kind of hard not to dance when they're playing. That's me. It was 4 o'clock in the morning.
It's from Interferon, opening this place called the Pyramid. Of course, at the time, there were rumors circulating that they weren't letting in any girls. And I remember I said to myself, what, they're not letting in any girls? Well, I certainly won't go there.
So we have many Marjan Moghaddam videos.
Yes, many of them MOS. Meat-tot sound. After the world-renowned German director who originated the term MOS, which is probably known as without sound. The reason it's without sound is mit-out sound. Oh, okay, you ruined my line about the fact that...
So anyways, I just thought I'd share that just so that, because the Pyramid as the cultural lab of the 1980s was very much my MFA, and that's where I met most of the artists. That's really where I think I came into my own as a young artist and got a sense of the vision that I had and what I was going to do in terms of my art practice. So that's why I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of that. Now, sometime around 1986, the Amiga computer came out. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Amiga. There's a whole cult around it now. All over the world, people rebuild them and do art with them. But anyways, for the introduction of the Amiga, Andy Warhol digitized Deborah Harry live at Lincoln Center and colorized her. And that was considered as revolutionary back then for a personal computer to deliver that capability. And I got an Amiga, and I started to do these animations there. And I'm going to show you this little snippet of, I sort of finished these animations and exhibited them at the Helms Degenerate Art Show in the East Village in 1990. It was called PMS, although I'd been doing the animations from 87 to 90. And the show was a protest by East Village artists against Senator Jesse Helms, who basically had started the culture wars by attacking the NEA and also PBS for funding artists such as Robert Mapplethorpe because of the homosexual content of his work, and artists such as Karen Finley because of the feminist work and the nudity that she did. So this was really the beginning of the culture wars, which unfortunately we're now seeing as a reality that's tearing apart the country. So this is like really when it all started. And I just wanted to mention that during this era, and Michael probably remembers the late 80s, computer art was men doing minimal conceptual color cycle triangles and polygons. Yes, am I correct in that? So I had to say that to say, and this is what I was doing as computer art. So we'll look at a little snippet of PMS. So this was a little bit different than the sort of work that was being shown as computer art then. Then for the next couple of years, I did a whole body of work that was based on fractal animations. Around this time, I also started to work in commercial production companies. I started in the late 80s. I was working at a studio, a production company near Lincoln Center called All Pro Productions, where I just did, animation. And also in the early 90s, I worked at a bunch of different studios. And in terms of the fine arts work that I was doing, is I was working with computer-generated fractals. And then I spent the next few years creating an entire body of work with these computer-generated fractals that included installations that were early virtual reality, had immersive mirror line cubes. There was a performance piece I would do with the animations projected on me. And then I would also show those fractal animations as chaosscape, like a landscape made out of chaos. And those were projected with a fake frame. What I have here is a short ZDF German TV story on me and my work at that time from 1995. And what you can do is you can actually see all these pieces that I just mentioned. You can see little clips of them. I'm sorry, 1996. It's in German. I will translate. He's in Soho. This was at Mary Anthony Galleries in Soho. Soho back then was, the art center. Those are the animations. This was my installation, the box. So you would basically get into that chair and slide in to where you had this mirror line cube, and your head would go into it, and the animations were like, infinite all around you. And you couldn't get people out of this. Like, nobody ever wanted to come out of this. This, by the way, installation ended up at Internet pioneer Josh Harris's offices at Jupiter Communications, which was the heart of the Silicon Alley of the mid-1990s. And some of the other prints also went to Ed Bennett, CEO of Prodigy Inc. Those were the prints of me during performance with the fractal animations projected on me. That's me, and that's the solid canvas. That's Daniel. I know. That's me showing my early internet website, which was a very big deal. Most people didn't even know what the internet was back then. I'm actually using Mosaic to show the site, by the way. That was the first browser. That's the performance piece. In Contemplation of Chaos, it was called, with electronic music by Lefferts Brown. Okay. So, I also thought I'd show you a little snippet of this computer art documentary, which kind of shows a lot of the early computer art shows in Soho that my work was shown in, so that you kind of get a sense of what computer art looked like in 1996. So this is the early internet and early virtual reality art and early computer art. Ken Feingold. You remember Ken. That's actually artist Ken Feingold. Michael knows Ken, who used to have the little robots, and the video feed would go over the internet so people could see what the robot was seeing during the exhibition. That was the opening for Synesthesia, which was one of the first major exhibitions of computer art in Soho. I had 3 pieces in that show, the box, and I also did the performance. That's the performance from the opening night. That's the voice of Laurie Anderson that you hear. She sort of narrated this documentary. So that was Future Designers of London. And these are all pretty much early sort of influential digital art artists and figures that you're seeing here. And also early interactive art. Keep in mind, this stuff was revolutionary in its time. I know it looks like ridiculously dated now, but once upon a time, that was not the case. Now, the .com stuff is here. In 1996, .com launched, and it was the first internet-based commercial art gallery in New York City. And what I actually have here is, I'm not going to go to the site. This is Rhizome. This is coming from, these are screen grabs from Rhizome's archive. And you don't want to go there because it's ridiculously slow in the afternoon because a lot of people use it for research. So this is an archive of the internet from 1996. So what I did is I created a 3D avatar of myself. And, you know, I projected the same fractal animations on my 3D avatar as a kind of 3D recreation. And then basically rendered out a series of GIF animations on the internet. So I recreated that same exact performance piece with these GIF animations and a series of art installations on the early.com gallery site. And that's actually an interview with me from 1996 where I basically predict that that art on the internet will be a big part of art. And of course, here I am continuing to do art on the internet, you know, 30 years later. So that was the 1990s. And then starting in the mid to late 1990s, I also started the Adoration series. This is Adoration of Gas Tank. I think that's when I first met Michael, which was at SIGGRAPH 2000 Art Gallery. And the Adoration series was based on this idea of future AIs that look back to their origins in post-humanist machine parts that we formed relationships with. So there was like adoration of gas tank, as in motorcycles being an extension of the physical body, adoration of Pac-Man, I don't have that here. There was a whole bunch of them, but I basically have two of them here, adoration of telephone and also adoration of gas tank. And adoration of telephone was in SIGGRAPH 2003 and CG03 Gallery, which was SIGGRAPH's 30 years of computer art gallery and traveling international exhibition, which toured the world between galleries and museums for 3 years. So that's Adorations, the Adoration series. And then in the 2000s, I'm trying to pick up some speed to make sure we have time to talk about the work that I've been doing the last few years, because we still have a ways to go. But in the 2000s, I started to do these visual music projects that were using audio triggering for the deformation of various 3D meshes. So the work was part procedurally driven, using algorithms for the generation of the geometry and additionally the animation, and also using hand modeling and hand animation, and also using audio triggering at the same time. This is probably the best known piece, Computer 69, which was in numerous festivals from 2006. It was in, I think it ended up in a total of 60 different festivals. It also won ResFest. It was also at a curated exhibit, video art exhibit at the Armory Show in 2008, and also Art Basel 2008 as well, art DVD. The music is by New York-based experimental musician Adam Kane on guitar. And the name of the piece, Computer 69, was actually the name of the track that Adam had. And I'll show you very quickly a little snippet of Turgitar also. Turgitar was also a selection of many, many different festivals. Let me just scrub through. Yeah. These were, of course, SD video, so they're slightly lower resolution, but keep in mind they're over 16, 17 years old at this point. So this was all 3D, rendered 3D. This mesh was part procedural, part modeled, and also animated part procedurally and part keyframe with the audio triggering. And that's, of course, Adam on the guitar as well. And I thought the last one I showed, this is my personal favorite tower. And before I quickly show this, the concept for tower was what I called impossible architecture. By impossible architecture, I mean architecture that can't exist in physical space. So my whole idea was to create architecture for the lens, architecture for the camera, architecture for the screen. And one of the biggest influences of my life, needless to say, was, of course, Stanley Kubrick's 2001. And Douglas Trumbull, the effects artist who did the split screen effect sequence for that movie, had also been a huge, huge influence on me. I mean, I was like every book on Douglas Trumbull. So I had always also wanted to explore the split screen effect as well. So this animation sort of combined both of them. And once again, it's also SD, which unfortunately does not hold up. But it was about exploring this structure through the use of a variety of different types of digital lenses. So, like I said, the structure can't really exist, and the perspective is shifting based on the shifting perspective of the digital lens. I mean, we should wait a little bit longer because then it comes out and you get to see it from the outside, but it goes on for a while, so quite an epic to render. My pieces usually are epics to render, but okay, so and then I think by the 2008, I started to do the same animations using the same exact pipeline and technology with a live improvised component as part of stage-based performances using what was at that time the early VJing software. This is Progressions at Cumble Theater in Brooklyn, and it was fun. This is the piece that was funded by New York Department of Cultural Affairs and also Brooklyn Arts Council. So that's Adam on stage with his guitar and pedals, and that's me on my laptop here. I think the interesting thing about this was the audience loved it. I mean, and it's kind of, the way it was laid out was like a journey. There were different 3D scenes, different worlds that, you know, the whole performance would sort of step through. And for me, it was really fascinating experiment. Can you really hold up the attention of an audience with a live performance that's primarily centered around media, not performers? And the interesting result, based on all the feedback that I received from the audience, was yes. And I also have a little bit of a snippet here from 2009. This was the Visual Music Marathon from Northeastern University, which created the first archive of visual music as a genre of art, going back to early Kandinsky films, actually, is apparently when the genre officially began. And I was a featured performer for the Visual Music Marathon, and the archive also includes a lot of the pieces that I did in the 2000s as well. And so this is what was funded by the Rockefeller Fund, and it was that's the 50-foot digital cinema screen at the SVA Theater, and that's me on my laptop. Adam is around here, and we had filled the 500-seat capacity theater, by the way, much to my shock. And I should also add horror before I went on stage, because I'm not exactly a trained performer, you know. I was like, oh my God.
So are you featuring these images?
Huh?
Or,
Yeah, I'm generating them. Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Live
Yeah.
during the performance.
Yeah. And it was interesting because it was like I had patches set up, but I had no idea what would happen. And during rehearsals, Adam came out of a jazz music training. So if I ever said, Adam, what are we doing? He's like, no, we go and we let it happen. I mean, he refused to have a plan. So whenever I had to work with Adam, it was like, you know, I was always because I'm like as I'm sure you've gathered, misorganized and planned in advance. You know, I have, how many backups did I bring with me today? That's how I am. And Adam was like, no, we go and we just let it happen, you know. So it was an interesting combination between Adam and I. It was an interesting generational experience too, because Adam was, you know, a millennial, a much younger person also. This all sort of culminates with Scab, and this is when my whole pipeline once again changed, and I went back to figures just like the 3D figures that I was doing in the 90s. In 2008, I started working with an early Vicon motion capture studio and using motion capture data to draw figures. And Scab was the animation that I did using motion capture of improvised performance. I worked with a dancer Yuqian Chen was her name. And the figures are, I modeled the figures, and the figures are modeled, so I basically modeled them, but a lot of them are also procedurally driven, and they're also driven by audio triggering, and additionally hand keyframe animation. So there was like 4 to 5 channels. And the piece explores post-traumatic stress syndrome. Scab became an official selection of the 2009 SIGGRAPH Computer Animation Festival. That's the world's top computer animation festival. It's also on DVD Review, which is the best of SIGGRAPH 2009. And the piece was, you know, really very much considered as a game changer back then. And it really allowed me to develop the pipeline that I've been using pretty much since for the last 10 years. So why don't we look at a little snippet of Scab? I'll just scrub forward. The idea with Scab is there's a figure that gets hit and struck, and that's the male. And then there's the figure that's the female, who's the recovery. So it's about being struck and recovering, and being struck and recovering, and repeating that. Pretty much stop that there. And so right after Scab, that's me from during the occupation of Zuccotti Park, Occupy Wall Street in 2011. There was an exhibition at that happened during the occupation of the JP Morgan building in Wall Street. And I was part of that art show. It was the Occupy Wall Street art show on Common Ground, which occupied for a total of 1 week the JP Morgan building. And for that show, I mean, people flew in from all over the world to participate in that art exhibition. What I did is I took one of the stills that I had from Scab, and I printed it on black and white on watercolor paper. And that little pink fuzz that you see is me handwriting all the slogans from Occupy Wall Street with red ink on that. And there's, by the way, authentic revolutionary patina, such as coffee spills and people's shoe marks and everything else on this print. And I'm preserving it in pristine condition with all the dirt and grime from Occupy Wall Street. But I think that, and I need to kind of briefly mention that in 2011, I genuinely felt that, you know, there was so many important things happening politically, socially, and culturally in our world, and I was so heavily impacted by it. And especially the failure of the Arab world in 2009 with so many of the revolutions that promised so much democracy and freedom not panning out and resulting in horrific civil wars and other destructions, that it genuinely puzzled me. Like, why have revolutions gone wrong? Why can't we have this sort of like classic resolution of David and Goliath with David winning? That, lo and behold, became the next body of work I produced and created and exhibited for the next few years. And that was, of course, my Of Revolutions collection, which I did from 2009 and 2015, which consisted of large format prints, installations, avatteering, that's the audience driving my 3D CG figures, VR and AR, of course, and sculpture, and what did I leave out? Animation, of course, animated paintings, lots of them. So I thought what we would do very quickly is to look at my exhibition reel for this body of work, and then we can come up to the current work. That's David and Goliath Can't Fight. And that big print is, of course, David and Goliath. It has embedded writings which are part autobiographical from my experiences of living through the 1978 Islamic Revolution in Iran, which is my country of origin, and also my reflections on revolutions in politics and also art. This is the second animation, David and Goliath Still Can't Fight. That's actually my selfie portrait from 2013. The screens all have my surfing cache and my private SMS in it, so it's also a self-portrait of me as a data set. That's one of my favorite pieces, Scattering of the Desiring Machines, loosely based on Deleuze and Guattari. That's Shooting Venus. That was actually an impromptu performance from Select Art Fair, and that was my Venus suite. I think you saw this one at Select Art Fair, yeah. That's the avateering, so the audience is actually driving those figures. There's a connect that's mocapping the audience in real time, and there's gestural control of explosions. So basically, every time you go like this, the explosions go off. That's, by the way, how that works. That's the excerpt of Scab, which started this whole collection. That piece has an interactive game in it. So it's a touch screen. Those are a collection of fembots also as part of that. And this is Foreign Wanderer, which was based on Peter Sloterdijk's Foreign trilogy. That's a virtual reality gallery that I have. So this is just moving around in it in VR. I have a version of this also on the internet, which you can access, and it's ready for Oculus or HTC Vive also. And if you ever look up, you'll see me waving down at you. Yeah, it's actually. I can send you the link. Yeah. So yeah. And which now brings us to the art hacks. So very quickly, I'm going to scroll down to when it all started. It basically started with this piece in February of 2016. And before I show this, this is the physical sculpture. I just wanted to clarify that this is the actual physical sculpture. And I was thinking of sending. I hadn't finished the physical sculpture, and I was sending a video of it to a collector of mine who has a lot of my pieces, and I thought, you know what? I should put in the animated figure the sculpture comes from, like a mixed reality thing, and send that to him, which I did. And then I love what I did so much that I decided to kind of play with it and just post it to Instagram as a fun little mixed reality piece. So here it is. That's my living room, by the way. So these are all basically CG. And I had a lot of fun when I did that. And shortly after that, I remember it was Frieze Art Fair in May of 2016. And I was there and I thought, why don't I hack my art into Frieze? So I shot this with my cell phone, and then that's Alex Delacourte's baby sculpture. And I quickly came home and I used my Kinect to mocap myself. And by the way, one of the problems with Kinect mocap, I don't know how many of you mocap with Kinect, but one of the issues with it is it glitches a lot. But the glitches worked out perfect for a balloon figure because a balloon figure would glitch, you know, as it moved. So it was perfect for this. So that's me hacking Alex Delacourte. But my favorite hack from that was, I knew David Wojnarowicz. Like I said, I did a music video for his band 3 Teens Kill 4 in the 1980s. And I remember that Burning Boy. And this was, so I put my Burning David into that. Now the music is actually David singing. That's one of David's songs from 3 Teens Kill 4. And one of the first people who liked this on Instagram was PPOW, the gallery that was exhibiting this. And then I felt like, this is an interesting thing. I'm not sure what this is, but I want to do more of it. So this was, I tested out a bunch of my other characters and posted this from the rest of the fair. And then I think I started basically the whole process. And I don't want to go through all of them, but they kind of started to evolve. So this is by the fall of 2016, Frieze London. I started to bring in a commentary about the over-commodification and financialization of the art world as exemplified by the contemporary art fair model. So some of these hacks became more and more aggressively critical of this phenomenon. And I felt like that's really the purpose of transgression and hacking, to be able to have a transformational dialogue. And that was, in my opinion, fully in keeping with the democratic ideals of the Internet 1.0 generation, of which I'm a member. A little bit more of the Sloterdijk philosophy there. And then the body of work started to grow. I do these during the hack, so I usually have only 2 days to work, so I have to like literally use an improvisational process to do them, which to me is fascinating, because like a lot of times the ideas literally come out of what I'm seeing. And for this, I took the footage right off Instagram. This is John Raffman, the digital artist, and he had done a virtual reality installation at Frieze London. And he actually regrammed this. You can see this on his wall too after I hacked it in that typical way in which digital artists can kind of sort of remix each other. But what I decided to do was to put in these sort of like digital figures that look back at the humans. Because what was in the original footage were all these people with the goggles on looking around. You have no idea what they're looking at. So my idea was to have the digital people looking back. And then there's like a little bit of a love story that happens. And then actually, this sort of brings us to the nude show at Gagosian in fall of 2016. And this is my non-binary nude glitch, which I've done a lot of pieces with since. And this is really the beginning of me starting to work with this new technique that I call chronometric sculpture. So what I'm really doing is I'm going way beyond character animation and mocap, but I'm literally creating sculptures in time on top of the mocap and the character animation. And this figure started as a glitch, which showed me this idea of a body trying to run away from itself, which I then built into the piece. And I also saw the suggestion of the breasts and a penis, which I then remodeled the figure to have both. There's a Louise Bourgeois that you see in the foreground, and it's the de Kooning in the background. And actually, the Louise Bourgeois woman with child is very similar in terms of the ambiguity of the gender suggested by the figure. And then the elections happen, and this is, I saw that during Art Basel that year, right after the election and the presidential election, Jeff Koons' puppy fell and shattered. And I couldn't help but think that that was a metaphor. So this is what I did with it. That's, of course, the Jeff Koons angel. And I'm going to skip over a lot of these. You can see these all, of course, on Instagram. But this is when I decided to hack Michael at our Marie Show Moving Image Fair. There's Michael, Professor Michael Reese, with a sculpture in his AR piece, and I decided to bring in one of my figures. There's Michael standing there himself, actually. And
I remember that because I was demonstrating the piece to somebody, talking, and then I felt something, you know, that weird feeling like you're being looked at or something. And I looked over.
I'm shooting him. Like, I'm like, I'm going to hack him. I'm going to hack him. I also wanted to show this. This is, I used to, because here I think an interesting thing, that one of the things that I love about internet art and net art and post-internet art is the aggregation. You know, this idea of taking things from here and there and putting them together. So there was a snippet of a speech by Bernie Sanders, and then I saw the John Baldessari chair with the model. And this art hack is called "I Can't Wear Those Shoes with Bernie Sanders."
And let the top 1% understand this. There is something profoundly wrong when the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%, and when 99% of all new income goes to the top 1%. This grotesque level of inequality is immoral. It is bad economics. It is unsustainable.
And this piece, this is actually my favorite. I'm doing a show in November at Rowan University Gallery, and I'm doing some AR for them also. I'm delivering a couple of AR pieces, but I'm also doing another version of this. The gallery director loves this. This is my glitched odalisque. I was at the Whitney, and I saw these paintings by David Sally and Walter Robinson, whom I very much like. And I wanted to sort of bring in something about the depiction of women by male artists and working with the premise of the odalisque. The Oriental harem girl is what an odalisque means. And I used, I found this fantastic glitched Persian trap music to use for it too. I'm going to stop because we're running out of time. I mean, there's a lot more political commentary. This one is, of course, fake news. That was a talk given by Ralph Rugoff of Hayward Gallery about fake news and the role of the illusory nature of art and the role of art in terms of fake news. And that sculptural figure that's walking, I call it Dolos, after the Greek god of illusion. So this piece is called Dolos in Wireframe at Frieze, London, 2017. And that's actually the non-binary nude from the Wrong Digital Art Biennial Post-Identity Pavilion last year. And which brings us to the KISS animation. This is the animation that then went viral. And as you can see on ArtGates, it has 2 million views. 2 million is a lot for Instagram. It's not a lot for Facebook and YouTube, but it's a lot for Instagram. So this is the animation that went viral. So why don't we take a look at this? And I'm going to stop this because we're almost running out of time. There's a lot more, but I just wanted to quickly show last spring I was commissioned to do an augmented reality sculpture for the Smithsonian Museum and also the National Cathedral as part of the We the People Arts Festival in Washington, D.C. So this is just a 1-minute sizzle reel for my piece from the Smithsonian. Depending on where you launched the AR, it could be really big or life-size. But if you launched it further away from you, it could be about 20 feet high. So when people are looking up, they're literally looking up at the 20-foot tall augmented reality animated sculpture. And there's a narrative structure to the figure. The figure rises from nothingness. It becomes self-aware. It pursues life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a suggestion of the Statue of Liberty. And it completes its life cycle. It deteriorates, and another one rises, and the cycle repeats. Those are in-app pictures. So people could take pictures with, with the augmented reality sculpture and upload it to their social media. So I'm going to stop because we're out of time. Actually, I just have to show the last hack. I have to show the last hack because this is launching my new hashtag #EveryWomanGoddess sculptures, and I'm going to be doing them all over the place. I'm going to intervene in all public spaces from now onwards. I'm going to hack my way into all the public spaces. So this is the launch of the hashtag #EveryWoman. And the idea with every woman is her body undergoes transformation. A woman doesn't have a single type of a body. I mean, this is the interesting part. When I got older and started to get all these knee injuries, I was told women get more knee injuries because they have tendon laxity. And so I started Googling up a story. Why do women have tendon laxity? Lo and behold, it's because women get pregnant. Their bodies are designed to expand and contract. That's why. And I thought, the best way to depict a woman is that way. She's not designed to be a static form because just over the course of her life, she will go through so many different physical changes. So these are the new hashtag #EveryWomans. And this is from the most recent Frieze London art hack with Kavanaugh, who haunted my Frieze London art hack, was the name of this piece. And he makes a cameo appearance in this.
Calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election. I will not be intimidated into withdrawing from this process.
Okay, so now we're really done. I have to show the camera now.
I think we have time for some questions if you guys want to weigh in on some stuff.
Yes?
How did you do that stuff?
Which one, the hacks?
Yeah.
Well, the hacks are, when the art fair started, I search the hashtag, so I find the videos on Instagram, and I download the videos. I track them in After Effects, and I export the track data. That's the track camera, and null for 3D coordinates to my 3D program. I use Lightwave 3D, and then I animate and composite.
What 3D programs do you use to make these things?
I use primarily Lightwave 3D. But I also use Motion Builder for mocap stuff. I do have a Neuron mocap suit, and I also use, occasionally I'll use some Blender, occasionally I'll use a little Houdini, occasionally I'll use Mesh Mixer, I should add, I truly hate After Effects for tracking. 9 out of 10 tracks fail in After Effects. So I just want to put it out. If you can avoid After Effects for tracking, avoid it by all means.
So what would you recommend then?
PF Track is a commercial software. It's a couple $1,000s. And the next one that I think I'm going to purchase, because this last time I literally said, that's it. I'm never tracking in After Effects again. Synthize, which is about a couple $100s. I think I'm going to actually get Synthize.
So how quick do you turn these around? Typically?
Typically, I have 2 days from start to finish, 2 days. I do it during the fair, so sometimes 3 days. But keep in mind, a lot of times I have like a large library of figures and mocap moves that I can sort of use. So it's a lot of times I'm not modeling from scratch or animating from scratch. I'm just kind of like editing or reanimating what I already have to work within the shot or work within the scene. But I find something, it's like interesting, because the second I start working, it's like I go into this like panic mode because I got to finish. But I've discovered, much to my amazement and surprise, that it is brought out. And it's kind of interesting because I'm 57 too, and it's like as you get older, coming up with ideas gets a little harder. But I've discovered that this particular workflow really kicks out a lot of creativity out of me. Like right now, I have to deliver all these pieces for a bunch of different digital art platforms that are now representing me, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like this. It's almost like without that urgency, without that transgressive thing, without that, oh, I'm going to do something, it's like it's like a lot harder for me to come up with ideas. Whereas with this, it just explodes out of me. Isn't that fascinating? That the second you have that, it's like, oh my God, I have 10,000 ideas. But sit down and create all these like 4K animations for this digital art platform, and I'm like twiddling my thumb, like, what am I going to do? Huh?
By this,
by the context.
It's a public forum, and that you're hacking an art world. You're doing something in response to, right, or in relationship with, as opposed to sitting in your studio. Oh, what should I do now? That's what you're talking about. That
exactly.
distinction.
Yeah, I'm looking at an exhibition space. I'm looking at what other artists are doing. But keep in mind, the reason that there's a lot of political stuff in this is because as I'm doing this, like everybody else, I'm multitasking. I'm reading the Huffington Post. I'm paying attention to political rants that friends have on their social media. And all this stuff sort of works its way in. And that's what I really like about it. It's like turning the entire internet into my studio and engaging a much wider world in terms of my art practice and process. But yeah, I'm astounded at how much creativity is exploding out of this process for me.
Do you ever find that there's other parts of the internet, the political, social, like bog you down from, or distract you from what you're making? Right?
Yeah, sometimes they do, but the beauty of doing these is that I get to do something with it. So instead of just, well, I'm a ranter on my social, not on my Instagram, but everywhere else. On my other social media platforms, I'm ranting on politics all day and commenting on friends' posts. And so I really enjoy this because it allows me to do art with it instead of just, you know, this frustrated, angry energy that just keeps getting regurgitated. So the hacks have been really great. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of these, even the political ones, like for instance, even the Kavanaugh, this recent Kavanaugh hack was regrammed by a whole bunch of different digital art channels on Instagram and also digital art zines on Instagram. And you know, if you go to their walls, there's not a lot of political stuff on it. You know, so I feel like really good that I'm pushing that dialogue into the eye candy land, if you may, into the eyeballs of Instagram, because I feel as if it should be part of the dialogue. I'm not trying to mess with people's Instagram time, because I know that's like people want to get away from politics and just look at pretty pictures on Instagram. But I feel as if it has to be a part of that. And I really believe that we're living through an era in which every kind of political emergency is unfolding. And this is the time for art to respond. To me, it's like life and death. This is it. This is showtime between the apocalyptic scenarios facing us in terms of climate change, the rise of fascism globally, not just in the United States. Look at what just happened in Brazil. And keep in mind, this is not a fun world to be having terrorism and revolutions in. Not when half the country has assault rifles. So this is a really scary time, and but you know, times like this also produce the greatest works of art. And so I believe that the mandate of every artist right now is to participate in this dialogue and to throw everything you have into it. And one last thing I wanted to put out, because we have so many millennials here. I don't know how many of you realize this, but there's 68 million millennials and only 65 million baby boomers. Michael and I are baby boomers, right? So everyone who came after us, which includes you, outnumber everybody else. The biggest voting bloc ever in the history of the United States. If all of you voted, you could forgive all of your own college debt tomorrow, like this. You could guarantee yourselves affordable housing, government-subsidized affordable housing. You could give yourself every kind of labor protection, and you could guarantee that you will have good lives. Because that's how powerful you are. Because that's how powerful you are. You are the single biggest voting bloc ever in the history of this country. And somebody's done a really good job of convincing you that your votes don't matter. I wonder why. Sorry, had to get out the vote PSA.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Do you think that you're going to really push and continue with the art hacks, or do you think that your art will still transform as new media technology improves and kind of snowballs as it does?
That's a very good question. Well, I love doing the hacks. I mean, so many people, you know, I get so many, if you read the comments too, it's like, for me as an artist, that's fantastic. I mean, it's like, you know, you show your, like I spent a fortune on showing art in a gallery and maybe 50 people see it. And then you do this, and it's like 100 comments. They got 500 messages in my inbox. I don't know how many regrams. 20. Look at some of these. 20,000 views. That's just on my wall. On other, there's even more. So it's great for me as an artist. So I'm going to keep doing them. But I'm already doing. I mean, I've done a whole bunch of augmented reality art pieces now for exhibition. For the show that's coming up, I'm actually doing some prints and augmented reality. I'm also doing more sculptures derived from these figures in physical sculpture. So yeah, I'm continuing to work with new technologies, and I think that the thing with me is I don't do new technology, and I mean I can only hope this has been evident based on what I've shown. I use new technology, but I have an ongoing dialogue that I have, and then what I do is I'll use the latest technology to put that dialogue into. But I try to avoid doing, okay, here's a 3D character with some weird textures on it, or here's a mocap character. I mean, I try to find a way to bring my vision and my dialogue and my art practice into new technology. But yeah, the hacks are way too much fun to give up at this point. I also should mention that I'm currently represented by a couple of different blockchain digital art platforms. So that's going to be interesting to see if I can monetize the attention economy. Because here's the interesting question: what happens when you get this many millions of views? You know? Well, I think that the Web 3.0 and Web 4.0, which is it's promising, anyways. To deliver monetization of the attention economy to artists, visual artists and musicians. And right now, if you're interested, we're doing a blockchain summit for artists on November 10th at the Brooklyn campus of LIU. That's where I teach. And we have a panel of wonderful people who are going to be talking about all the new platforms that allow artists to monetize their content. There's now social media websites where the number of likes and views you get for your social media posts translate into cryptocurrencies. So you're actually making money by having people look at your work. There's good and bad in that. The good is that, of course, artists get to make money. The bad is that it takes away from the personal and authentic nature of activities on social media, creating even greater frenzy and narcissism in terms of pay attention to me, I'm going to make money, pay attention to me, make money. So that's the bad of it. So we'll see what happens, of course, also with the blockchain, or Web 3.0 and Web 4.0, which are geared towards the future of work. So basically Web 1.0 is basic internet, then, you know. Yep.
I have complex questions, but we'll leave them for another day.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.